My name is Irma Wilson, 35 years old, and until last month I was just a financial administration specialist at Horizon Financial Partners. For over a decade, I managed critical financial protocols that kept our company afloat, though few recognized it. When our new VP dismissed me as just an admin, he had no idea the financial avalanche he was about to trigger. Before I tell you how a single decision cost our company millions, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated at work. Horizon Financial Partners might not be a household name, but with $1.2 billion in assets under management, we were a solid mid-tier player in the financial services industry. Our headquarters occupied the 23rd through 26th floors of a sleek glass tower in downtown Chicago, with regional offices in Atlanta, Denver, and San Francisco. We specialized in commercial real estate investments and corporate lending solutions, serving mainly medium to large businesses across the Midwest. I started at Horizon 14 years ago as an entry-level administrative assistant. Back then, I was 21, fresh out of community college with an associate degree in business administration. My initial job responsibilities were basic: answering phones, scheduling meetings, and organizing files. But I was ambitious and hungry to learn. During my second year, I noticed inconsistencies in how we tracked our banking relationships and suggested a new database system. The CFO at the time, Robert Mills, was impressed enough to assign me more financial tasks. I seized the opportunity, taking night classes in finance and accounting while learning everything I could on the job. By my 5th year, I had worked my way up to financial administration specialist. The title sounded modest, but the responsibilities were anything but. I managed the entire suite of banking relationships for Horizon, including our crucial $295 million credit facility spread across 3 major banks. This revolving line of credit was the lifeblood of our operations, funding new investments until long-term financing could be secured. My daily duties involved maintaining compliance with all banking covenants, monitoring transaction thresholds, ensuring proper documentation for all draws and repayments, and serving as the primary point of contact for our banking partners. I developed sophisticated tracking systems, implemented enhanced security protocols, and became the go-to person whenever a financial question arose. The current CFO, Mark Thompson, recognized my value. He often said, "Irma knows more about our banking relationships than anyone else in this company." Mark had been with Horizon for 8 years and understood that titles often failed to reflect true contributions. He advocated for my involvement in strategic meetings and made sure I received performance bonuses comparable to more senior-titled positions. Most of my colleagues respected me as well, particularly those who witnessed my work firsthand. The accounting team relied on my expertise for reconciling complex transactions. The investment managers consulted me about funding availability before pursuing new deals. Even the legal department sought my input on financial compliance matters. My workspace reflected my position in the company. While not a corner office, I had a dedicated space with glass partitions near the finance department, equipped with 3 monitors to track various financial systems simultaneously. The walls displayed my certifications in financial operations and banking compliance, earned through years of determined self-improvement. Our $295 million credit line was complex, divided between J.P. Morgan Chase Bank of America and Wells Fargo, each with different terms, interest rates, and compliance requirements. I maintained detailed records of every transaction, prepared monthly compliance reports, and conducted quarterly reviews with each bank. My meticulous attention ensured we never triggered any compliance violations that could freeze our credit access. I had also developed personal relationships with key contacts at each bank. Jennifer at Chase Michael, at Bank of America, and Thomas at Wells Fargo all knew me by name. They trusted my professionalism and responsiveness, often expediting requests because of our established rapport. These relationships proved invaluable during time-sensitive deals when we needed quick approvals. The security protocols for our banking systems were necessarily strict. As primary administrator, I held special authentication credentials that required regular verification. The banks implemented a security protocol where any change to the primary financial administrator would trigger an automatic review of the account. This detail would later prove crucial. Horizon had a collaborative culture before the recent changes. We had quarterly team-building events, celebrated birthdays with small gatherings, and maintained open communication across departments. The executive floor was accessible to all employees with leadership, practicing an open-door policy for questions and concerns. This atmosphere helped create loyalty among staff, with remarkably low turnover compared to industry standards. My personal workspace contained family photos, including my parents who had encouraged my education and my younger sister who was following in my footsteps at business school. These reminders kept me grounded during stressful periods when market volatility affected our financial operations. I had built a life around my career at Horizon, even delaying personal milestones like homeownership to invest time in my professional growth. Each morning, I arrived at 7:30, 30 minutes before most colleagues to review overnight financial transactions and prepare for the day ahead. These quiet moments allowed me to catch potential issues before they escalated. It was during one of these morning sessions that I first received the company-wide email announcing James Blackwell as our new Vice President of Administrative Operations. The announcement came through at 7:45 one Tuesday morning in April. Horizon Financial Partners welcomes James Blackwell as new Vice President of Administrative Operations. The email from our CEO, Richard Palmer, highlighted James's impressive background: an MBA from Wharton, 15 years of experience at prestigious firms, and a track record of operational optimization and cost efficiency. The email emphasized that James would focus on modernizing administrative functions and streamlining back-office operations. Reading between the lines, I suspected this meant budget cuts and reorganization. Still, I remained optimistic. Perhaps his expertise could actually improve our somewhat outdated administrative systems. The entire company gathered in the main conference room the following Monday to meet James. He strode in confidently dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Tall, with perfectly coiffed dark hair, he had the polished appearance of someone who had graced the covers of business magazines. "Good morning, everyone," he began with a dazzling smile. "I am thrilled to join the Horizon family and lead you into a more efficient future." For the next 20 minutes, James outlined his vision, consolidating administrative roles, implementing new technological solutions, and establishing clear hierarchical structures for optimal decision-making. He used phrases like excess administrative overhead and redundant positions that sent an uncomfortable ripple through the room. During the Q&A session, I raised my hand and introduced myself. I manage our banking relationships and financial compliance. I was wondering how your reorganization might affect the financial administration team. James's smile remained fixed, but his eyes flickered with slight annoyance at the question. "We will be evaluating all administrative positions based on measurable output metrics and strategic necessity," he said dismissively, before moving on to another question without really addressing mine. After the meeting, I approached James to introduce myself properly and explain more about my role. I handle our entire credit facility and banking compliance. I began extending my hand. He shook it briefly. That sounds like something we might need to integrate with the broader finance department. No need for silos in modern operations. Before I could elaborate, he excused himself to speak with Richard. The changes began subtly. First, James requested detailed reports from all administrative staff documenting every task performed within a 2-week period, including time spent on each activity. This exercise consumed hours that could have been spent on actual work. Next came the efficiency consultants, who shadowed various team members asking questions and taking notes. One observed me for a day appearing puzzled by the complexity of the banking compliance work I handled. "This seems more like a finance role than administration," she remarked. "That is exactly what I tried to explain to Mr. Blackwell," I responded, hopeful this observation might reach him. 3 weeks after James arrived, the first round of changes was announced. 4 administrative assistants from various departments were let go, their responsibilities consolidated among remaining staff. The office layout was redesigned to create an open collaboration space, eliminating private workstations for most administrative personnel. I managed to keep my workspace intact due to Mark's insistence that my work required privacy for banking matters. James reluctantly agreed, but commented that we would revisit the space allocation in Phase 2. During a departmental meeting, I tried to contribute insights on how certain financial processes could be improved. James cut me off mid-sentence. "Let us focus on strategic finance matters first, rather than administrative details," he said, despite the fact that my point directly related to banking efficiency. My colleague Sarah from the accounting department noticed his dismissive attitude. "He did not even let you finish," she whispered, as the meeting continued. That was actually an important point about the transaction verification process. Each week brought new procedural changes, often implemented without consulting the staff who would be affected. New software was introduced for tracking administrative tasks, requiring hours of training while adding little value to our workflow. Traditional responsibilities were shifted between departments with minimal guidance. My growing concern turned to anxiety when Mark announced he would be traveling to Europe for 2 weeks to meet with potential investors. "You will be fine, Irma," he assured me before leaving. "Just keep everything running smoothly as you always do." With Mark away, I would report directly to James for any urgent matters. The thought made me uneasy, but I maintained my professionalism. "Safe travels, Mark. I will handle everything here." The day after Mark departed, James requested a meeting with me. I brought my laptop and notebook, prepared to discuss our banking relationships and current financial operations. "Irma," he began without preamble, "I have been reviewing your position, and I think we need to redistribute some of your responsibilities to create a more integrated financial structure." I maintained my composure. I would be happy to discuss workflow optimization, but it might be beneficial to wait for Mark's return so we can ensure all critical financial protocols remain intact. James's expression hardened slightly. "I appreciate your input, but organizational decisions fall under my purview. We will be moving forward with some changes immediately." As I left his office, a knot formed in my stomach. Something told me the stability I had built over 14 years was about to be severely tested. The tension built gradually over the next week. James began implementing changes to financial processes without fully understanding their implications. He insisted we streamline the documentation for credit line draws, reducing the multi-layered approval process I had carefully developed. "This much paperwork for routine transactions is excessive," he declared, during a department meeting. "We need to cut this process down to increase efficiency." I raised my hand. "With respect, Mr. Blackwell, these verification steps are required by our banking agreements. Changing them could potentially violate our covenant terms." James gave me a cold look. "If other financial institutions can operate with more efficient processes, so can we. Please prepare a simplified procedure by next week." Rather than argue publicly, I sent James a detailed email outlining the specific contractual requirements from each bank, highlighting sections that mandated our current procedures. His response was brief: "Find a workaround. The current process is too cumbersome." I spent evenings researching alternatives that might satisfy both James's demand for efficiency and the bank's requirements for security. I drafted a compromise proposal and scheduled time to discuss it with him, only to receive a calendar decline with the note, "Too busy with strategic priorities." My frustration grew when I discovered an important meeting with representatives from J.P. Morgan Chase had been scheduled without my knowledge. As the primary contact for all banking relationships, I should have been not just included, but central to the preparation. I learned about it only when Jennifer from Chase called me directly. "Irma, I wanted to confirm some details about tomorrow's meeting. I was surprised not to see you on the invite list." Embarrassed, I had to admit I did not know about the meeting. "Let me check on that and get back to you, Jennifer." When I approached James about the oversight, his response stunned me. "That meeting requires executive presence. We are discussing strategic banking relationships, not administrative processes." "But I manage all our banking relationships," I countered. "I have the historical knowledge and contextual understanding needed for productive discussions." James dismissed my concern with a wave. "Randy from finance will handle the technical aspects. Your documentation can be forwarded to him." The meeting proceeded without me. Later, Sarah from accounting stopped by my desk looking concerned. "That Chase meeting was a disaster," she whispered. "Randy could not answer half their questions, and they kept asking why you were not there." The following day, James called a department meeting where he openly criticized what he called institutional resistance to necessary change. While he did not name me specifically, his gaze lingered in my direction several times. "Some people get too comfortable in their roles," he said to the room. "They mistake pushing papers for strategic value. In this new era, we need adaptability, not guardians of outdated processes." The message was clear. My role and expertise were being deliberately diminished. After the meeting, I retreated to the break room, trying to collect myself. Sarah joined me, concern evident in her expression. "Are you okay?" He was completely out of line in there. I stirred my coffee slowly. "I have been here 14 years, Sarah. I built these systems. And now he acts like what I do is just pushing papers around." Sarah glanced around to ensure we were alone before leaning closer. "You should know something. I overheard James talking to HR yesterday. He is planning a bigger reorganization next month, targeting what he calls administrative bloat. Your name came up." My stomach dropped. "He wants to let me go." "I do not have details," Sarah admitted, "but he mentioned consolidating your role with the general finance team and questioned whether a dedicated position was necessary." That evening I tried calling Mark in Europe, but with the time difference and his packed schedule of meetings, I only reached his voicemail. I left a message trying to sound calm while requesting a call back when convenient. The next morning I arrived to find someone else at my backup filing cabinet, removing documents. It was Brian, a recent finance hire who had joined just 2 months ago. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, setting down my bag. Brian looked uncomfortable. Oh, good morning, Irma. Mr. Blackwell asked me to familiarize myself with the banking documentation. He mentioned I would be taking over some of the routine compliance filings. I maintained my composure despite the shock. Those files contain sensitive banking information. I would appreciate if you would wait so I can properly brief you on the confidentiality requirements. Brian nodded and stepped away from the cabinet. Sure, of course. Just following directions. Over the next few days, more of my responsibilities were quietly reassigned. James had instructed various finance team members to take over different aspects of my role, often without the necessary context or training. I found myself working later each evening, double-checking their work to prevent serious errors from slipping through. Minor mistakes began appearing in our financial documentation. A compliance report submitted to Bank of America used incorrect transaction codes. A covenant calculation for Wells Fargo contained a formula error. I quietly corrected these issues before they created problems, documenting everything meticulously in case I needed to defend my work later. No acknowledgement came for these corrections. Instead, James questioned why I was logging overtime hours. The transition should be reducing your workload, not increasing it, he remarked during a brief hallway encounter. I tried explaining that proper training and transition would actually require more hours initially, not fewer. He cut me off mid-sentence. Just make sure everything is properly documented for handover. We need to complete this reorganization efficiently. By Friday of that week, the strain was showing. I had barely slept, worried about both my job security and the integrity of our financial systems. My desk, once meticulously organized, was now covered with transition documents and training materials I was frantically creating to ensure nothing critical would be missed if I were removed. I made one final attempt to reach Mark, sending an urgent email outlining my concerns about the hasty reorganization of financial processes. His auto-reply indicated he was in meetings with limited email access until Monday. As I packed up for the weekend, Brian approached my desk looking troubled. Irma, I am sorry about all this. For what it is worth, none of us in finance understand why Mr. Blackwell is changing systems that were working perfectly well. His kindness nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. Thank you, Brian. Just promise me you will be careful with the compliance protocols. They matter more than people realize. Little did I know that Monday morning would bring the confrontation that would change everything. Monday arrived with a gloomy overcast that matched my mood. I had spent the weekend updating my resume and researching financial administration positions at other firms, just in case. Still, 14 years at one company was not something I was prepared to walk away from without a fight. I arrived at 7:15 earlier than usual, hoping to organize my thoughts before the office filled. To my surprise, James was already there, his office light visible through the glass partition. At 8:30 sharp, my desk phone rang. Please come to my office immediately, James said without preamble before hanging up. My heart raced as I gathered a notebook and pen. Was this about the reorganization? Had Mark returned early and intervened? I straightened my blazer, took a deep breath, and walked the 30 steps to James's office, knocking once on the open door. Come in and close the door, he instructed, not looking up from his computer. I sat in the chair facing his desk, noting with unease that Brenda from Human Resources was also present, seated quietly in the corner with a folder in her lap. James finally looked up. Irma, as part of our ongoing organizational restructuring, we are making some significant changes to streamline our administrative functions. The rehearsed corporate language told me everything I needed to know before he even reached the point. After careful evaluation, we have determined that your position is redundant within our new structure. The responsibilities of Financial Administration Specialist will be distributed among the finance team for greater integration and efficiency. Despite anticipating this possibility, the actual words hit like a physical blow. 14 years of dedication dismissed in a single sentence. Today will be your last day with Horizon Financial Partners, he continued. Brenda has your separation documents prepared. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Mr. Blackwell, I understand you are restructuring, but my role is critical to our banking relationships. I manage our entire credit facility and all compliance protocols. There are specific security clearances and bank verifications that only I am authorized to handle. James's expression hardened. This decision is not up for discussion. The finance team is perfectly capable of handling administrative banking tasks. These are not just administrative tasks. I insisted, my voice remaining professional despite my racing heart. Our $295 million credit line requires specific compliance management. The banks have designated me as the authorized administrator for security purposes. James leaned forward, irritation clear on his face. Let us be clear, Irma. You are just an admin with a specialized focus. Your role is easily replaceable with the right processes in place. We have already begun transitioning your responsibilities to appropriate finance personnel. The dismissive phrase, just an admin, sparked something inside me. 14 years of expertise, reduced to a belittling label. May I at least complete the monthly compliance certification due today? I asked, knowing the potential consequences of missing this critical deadline. It requires my specific credentials and verification. Brian will handle it, James replied curtly. You need to complete your exit process now. Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Perhaps we could allow Irma to properly transfer her authentication credentials for the banking systems. My understanding is that there are specific security protocols. James waved his hand dismissively. That can be handled by IT. We need to terminate all system access immediately, as per company policy. Brenda stood and handed me the folder. This contains your severance information continuation of benefits, paperwork, and exit procedures. I will need to escort you to collect your personal belongings and then to the exit. As I stood on shaky legs, I made one final attempt. The banking system requires formal notification and transition of administrative rights. If my access is simply terminated without proper protocols, it could trigger security measures within the banking system. James stood as well, clearly finished with the conversation. Our IT department will handle any technical issues that arise. This is standard procedure, Irma, not unique to your position. I recognized the futility of further explanation. He had made up his mind without understanding the specialized nature of my role and the sophisticated security measures our banks had in place. Brenda led me back to my desk, where a small cardboard box had already been placed. Under her watchful eye, I began collecting personal items, family photos, certifications, the plant I had nurtured for 5 years, and a few desk accessories. The task felt surreal, dismantling 14 years in less than 15 minutes. As I packed, our IT specialist, Aaron, arrived with a tablet. I need to verify the revocation of your system access. Irma, can you confirm you are no longer logged into any company accounts? I logged out of my computer while Aaron watched. There are specialized banking portals that require formal administrator transition, I explained. They cannot simply be deactivated without proper notification to the financial institutions. Aaron looked uncertain. I just have standard systems on my checklist. Can you list these special portals? I provided the names of our 3 banking portals and the central compliance monitoring system. Aaron noted them down with a frown. I do not have specific protocols for these. I will need to check with the finance team about handling specialized access. The finance team would not have administrative rights to these systems, I explained, feeling increasingly concerned. Only I and Mark Thompson are registered with the banks as authorized administrators. Aaron shrugged apologetically. I will make a note, but I need to proceed with standard access termination for now. As I finished gathering my belongings, James appeared. Is there a problem here? Aaron explained the situation with the banking portals. James's impatience was palpable. Just terminate all access according to protocol. Finance will sort out any administrative issues later. I clutched my box of belongings, 14 years reduced to what I could carry in my arms. As Brenda prepared to escort me to the elevator, I turned to make one final appeal. Mr. Blackwell, please contact Mark Thompson immediately about the banking administrator credentials. This is not a routine transition issue. James checked his watch. Thank you for your concern, Irma, but we have this under control. Brenda, please proceed with the exit. As the elevator doors closed, I felt a mixture of shock, anger, and an odd sense of foreboding. They truly did not understand what they had just done. Unknown to James and the rest of the executive team, a sophisticated security system was already initiating its protocols the moment my access was terminated. The banking consortium that managed our $295 million credit facility had implemented enhanced security measures following several high-profile corporate fraud cases in recent years. Each of our 3 banking partners, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, had integrated their security systems with a central monitoring protocol. Any significant change to authorized administrative personnel triggered an automatic security review. The sudden termination of my credentials without proper transition notification set off warning flags across all 3 systems simultaneously. 45 minutes after I left the building, while I was still sitting stunned in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, the automated security system completed its initial assessment. Finding unauthorized changes to administrator credentials without proper verification, it initiated the first level of security response, a temporary freeze on all transaction processing. At Horizon's headquarters, the first sign of trouble came when Lisa from the investments team called the finance department in confusion. The wire transfer for the Miller property just bounced back. The system is saying our account access is under security review. Is this some kind of technical glitch? Brian, who had been assigned some of my former duties, was baffled. Let me check the system, he offered, only to discover he could not access the banking portal at all. A red message across the screen read, "Account access suspended pending security verification. Please contact your financial institution." Within minutes, similar calls began coming in from across the company. Pending transactions were being declined. Payment processing had stopped. Even basic account information was inaccessible. Horizon's entire financial operation was grinding to a halt. Brian rushed to James's office, interrupting a meeting. "Sir, we have a serious problem. All banking systems are showing security lockouts. Nothing is processing, and we cannot access any accounts." James frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Have you contacted IT? This sounds like a system issue." "IT is looking into it, but they think it is coming from the bank's side. All 3 banking partners are showing the same security freeze messages." James dismissed the concern with a wave. "Call our contact at Chase. and get it sorted out. This is probably just a routine security flag from the system changes." Brian hesitated. "That is the thing, sir. Jennifer at Chase always dealt directly with Irma. I do not have a direct contact there, just the general customer service line." James's irritation grew visible. "Then call the general line and escalate to a manager. This should be a simple fix." But it was not a simple fix. When Brian called Chase's corporate banking division, he was transferred to the security department. The representative there was polite but firm. "We show an unauthorized change to your administrator credentials without proper verification. This automatically triggers a security review under federal banking regulations." "But I am authorized," Brian protested. "I have been assigned to manage these accounts." "Our records do not show any transition request or new administrator verification," the representative replied. "We have Irma Wilson and Mark Thompson listed as the only verified administrators for Horizon Financial Partners. Any change requires formal documentation and identity verification from one of them." Similar responses came from Bank of America and Wells Fargo. The security protocols were functioning exactly as designed, locking down access when unauthorized changes were detected. By 11:30, panic was spreading through the finance department. A major vendor payment of $2 million was scheduled for noon, and a $7 million property acquisition was pending for the following day. Without access to the credit line, both transactions would fail. The real crisis hit at noon when Richard Palmer, the CEO, stormed into James's office. "What the hell is happening with our banking access? I just had the Westridge Group calling me directly because their 7-figure payment failed. They are threatening to pull out of the deal entirely." James struggled to project confidence. "We are working through some routine security protocols with the banks. IT changes sometimes trigger these reviews. It should be resolved shortly." Richard was not appeased. "This is not acceptable. Get it fixed immediately." "And where is Irma? She usually handles these banking issues." The room fell silent. James cleared his throat. "As part of our administrative restructuring, Irma's position has been eliminated. Her duties have been redistributed to the finance team." Richard stared in disbelief. "You fired Irma without consulting me or Mark. She manages our entire banking relationship." "She was an administrative position," James defended. "Her role was redundant with proper finance integration." At that moment, Brian returned with more troubling news. "Sir, I just spoke with the Banking Consortium's security department. They say the only way to lift the security freeze is through verified administrator intervention. Either Irma needs to formally transfer her authorization, or Mark needs to establish new administrators through an in-person verification process." Richard turned to James, his face reddening. "Call Mark. Now." Mark was in the middle of a meeting in London when the urgent call came through. Seeing the CEO's name, he stepped out to take it. "Mark," Richard said, without preamble, "we have a serious situation. Our entire credit line is frozen. All $295 million locked down across all 3 banks." Mark's confusion was evident even across the Atlantic. "What? How is that possible? Irma monitors those systems constantly." "Irma was terminated this morning," Richard replied grimly. "Part of James's reorganization." A prolonged silence followed. Irma was let go. Mark finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Without consulting me, she is our primary banking administrator, Richard. The banks have her biometric data and personal verification codes. She literally cannot be removed from the system without proper transition protocols." Well, she was removed, Richard confirmed. And now we are completely locked out of our credit facility. The banks are saying it will take a formal security review and administrator re-verification. Put James on the phone, Mark demanded. When James took the call, Mark did not mask his anger. What possessed you to terminate our banking administrator without consulting me or understanding her role? Do you have any idea what you have done? James attempted to defend his decision. She was performing administrative functions that could easily be integrated into the finance team. It was a straightforward reorganization decision. Administrative functions. Mark's voice rose. She was our registered banking security administrator. Her credentials were linked to our entire credit facility. By terminating her access without proper protocols, you have triggered every security measure in the system. The gravity of the situation was finally beginning to dawn on James. How do we fix this? Can you override it remotely? No, Mark said flatly. I cannot. I am listed as a secondary administrator. I can verify new administrators, but only after completing an in-person verification at each bank, which I obviously cannot do from London. The system is designed specifically to prevent remote tampering or coercion. Then we need to bring Irma back in to transfer her authorization properly. Richard interjected. If she is willing, Mark replied. And even then the security review will take time. The banks do not take these triggers lightly. As the call ended, Richard turned to James, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Find Irma, now. Mark cut his European trip short, booking the next available flight back to Chicago. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. By end of business Monday, the implications of the credit freeze were becoming painfully clear. 3 pending property acquisitions worth a combined $42 million were at risk. Vendor payments totaling nearly $5 million were overdue. The Westridge Group had already sent a formal letter threatening to withdraw from their $15 million partnership agreement if their payment was not processed by Wednesday. The executive team gathered in the main conference room Tuesday morning, faces grim as they assessed the damage. Richard had aged years overnight, the strain, evident in the deep lines around his eyes. Where do we stand with the banks? He asked the room. The new head of finance, Alan Rogers, cleared his throat. I have spoken with all 3 banking partners. The security protocol is automated and cannot be manually overridden. They require verified administrator authorization to restore access. And Mark's status. His flight lands at 2 this afternoon. But even with him here, the banks require specific verification steps. JP Morgan and Bank of America need in-person appearances with identification. Wells Fargo requires both biometric verification and security questions that only the registered administrators would know. James sat silently at the far end of the table, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. And Irma, Richard asked, turning to Brenda from HR. We have left multiple messages, she reported. No response yet. Given the circumstances of her termination, she left the implication hanging uncomfortably in the air. Richard's gaze shifted to James. You told her she was just an admin. I understand. After 14 years of service. James shifted uncomfortably. I may have used that phrase in explaining the reorganization rationale. Alan spoke up again. I should mention that even if we reach Irma and she agrees to help, the banks have informed us that their security review process typically takes 7 to 10 business days once initiated. They need to verify there is no fraud or coercion involved. A collective groan filled the room. 10 business days without access to their credit line would be catastrophic. What are our alternatives? Richard asked. We could attempt to establish an emergency line of credit with another institution, Alan suggested. But that would take time for approval, and the rates would be punitive given our urgent situation. We could liquidate some holdings offered Stephanie from the investment division, but that would mean selling at a loss in the current market. By midday, the situation had worsened. Word had begun spreading through the financial community about Horizon's apparent liquidity problems. 2 clients had already called asking about the stability of their investments. The company's carefully cultivated reputation was at risk. Mark arrived at the office directly from the airport, still carrying his travel bag, eyes red from the overnight flight. His first question was direct. "Have we reached Irma?" "Not yet," Richard admitted. "We have tried her cell email home phone." "Try her sister in Evanston," Mark suggested. "They are close. And for God's sake, when we do reach her, make sure she understands we recognize our error and value her contribution." A meeting with the banking representatives was scheduled for 4 that afternoon. Representatives from all 3 banks arrived along with their security compliance officers. The mood was professional, but cool, as they explained the situation. The integrated security system functioned exactly as designed, explained Michael from Bank of America. When an authorized administrator is suddenly removed without proper protocols, it triggers an automatic freeze to protect against potential fraud or system compromise. "But surely you can see this was an internal restructuring mistake, not fraud," Richard argued. Thomas from Wells Fargo shook his head. "The system does not distinguish between malicious action and administrative error. The security protocols are designed to prevent unauthorized access under any circumstances." "How quickly can we resolve this once we have Miss Wilson's cooperation?" Mark asked. "The standard review takes 7 to 10 business days," Jennifer from Chase confirmed. "We might expedite to 5 business days given your long-standing relationship, but that is the absolute minimum. Financial security regulations do not allow shortcuts." As the bankers left, James attempted to defend his actions. The restructuring plan was sound. How was I supposed to know about these specialized security protocols? Mark's patience finally snapped. By asking questions before making decisions? By consulting with the CFO before firing the person who manages our entire banking relationship? By taking 5 minutes to understand that administrative does not mean unimportant. Richard intervened. "Assigning blame will not solve our immediate problem. We need to find Irma." By Wednesday morning, the crisis had deepened. The company's stock had dropped 11% as rumors spread about liquidity problems. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal had called the communications department asking for comment on Horizon's credit freeze. It was Sarah from accounting who finally made contact with Irma, reaching her through a personal email address they had exchanged years ago for a company softball team. "She is hurt and angry," Sarah reported to the executive team. "She felt disrespected and dismissed after 14 years of dedicated service. But she is willing to talk to Mark." The conversation between Mark and Irma was private, but when Mark returned to the conference room, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "She will help us under certain conditions." "Anything," Richard said immediately. "Whatever she wants." Mark outlined Irma's terms: reinstatement with a promotion to Director of Financial Operations reporting directly to the CFO, a significant salary increase, a formal written apology, and a company-wide acknowledgement of the situation and her role in resolving it. "Agreed," Richard said without hesitation, looking pointedly at James. "Anything else?" "She wants structural changes to how administrative roles are valued and compensated throughout the organization," Mark added, "and a seat at the executive committee meetings going forward." James finally spoke up. That seems excessive for an administrative. Enough. Richard cut him off. Your lack of understanding about the nature of her role created this crisis. We are not interested in your opinion on her value to this company. Irma arrived at the office Thursday morning, escorted directly to the executive conference room, where the banking representatives were waiting. The atmosphere was tense as she entered dressed professionally in a navy suit that projected confidence despite the circumstances. Richard stood immediately. Irma, thank you for coming. We owe you an apology and our gratitude. She acknowledged him with a nod before turning to the banking representatives, Jennifer Michael Thomas. I understand we have a situation to resolve. For the next 2 hours, Irma worked methodically with the banking team, completing verification procedures, documenting the administrative error, and initiating the security review process. Her knowledge of the systems was evident in every interaction, as was the respect the banking representative showed her. We will expedite the review as much as regulations allow, Jennifer promised. Given Miss Wilson's verification and the circumstances, we should have preliminary access restored by Monday, with full functionality by Wednesday. That is the best we can do, Michael added. The security systems are designed specifically to be difficult to override. After the bankers left, Richard asked Irma to stay for a private meeting with the executive team. As she sat at the conference table now as a peer rather than an employee being summoned, the power dynamic had visibly shifted. We have prepared the paperwork for your new position. Richard began sliding a folder across the table. All your terms have been accepted without reservation. Irma opened the folder, reviewing the documents carefully, and the structural changes to administrative role evaluation. We will form a committee immediately, Mark assured her, with you leading the initiative. James remained silent at the far end of the table, his future at the company clearly in question. Irma closed the folder. I accept the position. I can start immediately to minimize further disruption. As she left the conference room, the weight of the past few days visible in her tired eyes, but her posture straight with dignity, the executive team exchanged glances. They had narrowly averted disaster, but the lessons learned would reshape the company for years to come. The following Monday, exactly 1 week after my termination, I walked back into Horizon Financial Partners with a new title, a new office on the executive floor, and a new understanding of my own value. The company-wide email, announcing my appointment as Director of Financial Operations, had gone out Friday afternoon, along with a transparent explanation of the credit freeze situation. My first action in my new role was to establish proper documentation for all critical financial systems, creating detailed transition protocols to prevent similar situations in the future. Mark and I worked closely with the banking partners to implement a more sophisticated administration structure with appropriate backups and verification systems. As for James, he was not fired outright, which surprised many. Instead, Richard reassigned him to lead a new department focusing on operational efficiency in our investment tracking systems, an area where his skills could be valuable, but where he would have limited personnel authority. More importantly, he was required to participate in a comprehensive training program about our financial systems, effectively becoming my student for 6 weeks. Our first interaction in this new dynamic was uncomfortable for both of us. James entered my new office stiffly, the forced humility evident in his posture. I have been asked to consult with you about the banking security protocols, he began formally. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. We will be working together for some time on this. We might as well establish a professional relationship. He sat, his expression carefully neutral. "I want to acknowledge my error in judgment regarding your role." "It was not just about my role," I replied calmly. "It was about understanding that titles often fail to reflect true contributions. The word administrative is not synonymous with unimportant." This lesson became the foundation for the organizational changes that followed. With Richard's full support, I led a comprehensive review of all administrative positions throughout the company, identifying critical functions that had been undervalued and undercompensated. We discovered that many so-called administrative roles actually contained essential operational components that the company relied upon, from client relationship management to compliance oversight to specialized system administration. We restructured job descriptions, reporting lines, and compensation packages to reflect actual responsibilities rather than traditional hierarchies. The monthly executive committee meetings, which I now attended as a full member, became forums for broader operational understanding. Department heads were required to identify critical administrative functions within their teams and recognize the individuals performing them. 3 months after the credit freeze incident, we held a company-wide town hall to unveil the new organizational structure. Standing at the podium, I surveyed the faces watching me, many of them administrative staff, who had never before been invited to such events. The strength of any organization lies not in its organizational chart, but in the interconnected knowledge and expertise of its people, I began. Titles can mislead us into undervaluing essential contributions. At Horizon, we are committed to recognizing substance over labels. The personal journey of recovery took longer than the professional one. The words, "just an admin," had cut deeper than I initially acknowledged. For weeks after returning, I questioned my place despite my new title and office. Had I been valued only after creating a crisis? Would the respect last once the memory of the credit freeze faded? Sarah became an unexpected source of support, stopping by my office regularly to check in. "You know what I admire most," she said one afternoon. "You did not come back angry or looking for revenge. You came back focused on fixing the system." Gradually, I rebuilt my confidence, not based on external validation, but on the clear evidence of my expertise and contributions. Each successful banking negotiation, each improved process, each grateful acknowledgement from colleagues reinforced my professional identity. The financial impact of the credit freeze was substantial, but not catastrophic. The expedited security review allowed us to restore basic functionality within 5 business days and full access within 8. We lost one major deal and paid several late fees, but our banking partners worked with us to minimize the damage once access was restored. The broader impact on company culture proved more significant and ultimately more positive. 6 months after the incident, employee satisfaction scores in administrative departments had increased by 34%. Turnover among support staff dropped dramatically. Cross-departmental collaboration improved as artificial hierarchies based on job titles diminished. 1 year after my return, I stood again before the company at our annual meeting, this time presenting the results of our organizational transformation. The data was compelling: improved efficiency, higher retention rates, better compliance metrics, and stronger banking relationships with increased credit facilities, now totaling $350 million. During the Q&A session, a new administrative assistant asked what I considered the most important lesson from the experience. "Value is not determined by your title," I answered after a moment's reflection. "It is determined by your impact. Understanding your true worth gives you the confidence to demand appropriate recognition, and the wisdom to create systems where everyone's contributions are properly valued. As I concluded my presentation, I looked directly at James, now successfully leading his specialized department with a noticeably different management style. Sometimes, being underestimated is your greatest advantage, because when you finally show your worth, no one will ever question your value again. That evening, as I prepared to leave my office, Richard stopped by my door. "You know, Irma, that credit freeze might have been the best thing that ever happened to this company." I raised an eyebrow. "A multi-million-dollar disruption was the best thing for us. It forced us to see what was right in front of us all along," he replied. "The hidden infrastructure of expertise that actually keeps this place running." His words stayed with me as I drove home, a profound affirmation of the journey I had traveled. From just an admin to an architect of organizational change, my path had been difficult, but ultimately transformative, not just for me, but for dozens of others whose contributions had previously gone unrecognized. The lesson I carry forward is simple but powerful. True value cannot be diminished by labels or dismissive words. It exists independently of titles or perceptions. When you know your worth, no one can take it from you, and when you stand firm in that knowledge, you create the opportunity not just for personal recognition, but for systemic change that lifts others along with you. I would love to hear from you in the comments below about a time when you were underestimated at work and how you handled it. Did you walk away, or did you find a way to demonstrate your true value? Please, like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life workplace stories and share with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. Remember, your value is not defined by your title, but by the unique expertise and perspective you bring to the table every day.